Welcome to the Talking Precision Medicine podcast, brought to you by Genialis. I'm your host, Raphael Rosengarten, CEO and co-founder of Genialis. On this podcast, we discuss the future of healthcare and health technology, and how advances in data and data science are fueling the next industrial revolution. Please subscribe to the show on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to podcasts. And for more information on Genialis and our unique approach to AI-driven precision medicine, please visit our website at www.genialis.com. That's www.genialis.com. Now, on to the show. It's my pleasure today to welcome Najat Khan to the show. Najat is the Chief R&D Officer and Chief Commercial Officer at Recursion Pharma. Now, Recursion, as many of you know, is maybe the most visible and thus far successful company to emerge from the tech bio movement. Some of us think it may be called the industry winner, at least thus far, and is certainly an iconic company for those of us who are immersed in artificial intelligence for drug discovery. Nevertheless, some of our listeners don't read the news as closely as I do and may not know much about it. So, Najat, maybe in your words, tell us, what is Recursion Pharma?
That's a great question. First of all, thank you for having me. It's great to be here today. Look, Recursion Pharma is a company that's leveraging AI and end-to-end AI tech stack to transform how medicines are made, from discovery to development, to radically transform the lives of the patients that we serve.
What do you mean by end-to-end? Let's start there.
Yeah. When I look at the world today, whether it's tech bio, pharma, biotech, all these companies, the ultimate goal is to make transformational medicines for patients. There is some use of AI, but it is very ad hoc point solutions. Versus, I think what Recursion has done is we have a vertical stack of leveraging AI from uncovering new insights in biology, decoding new biology to understand what's actually driving the disease, leveraging AI to then design the molecules to prosecute that disease, and then increasingly leveraging AI in clinical development, so not just discovery, in clinical development to pick the right patients at the right time to drive true precision medicine, which has been the holy grail for many, many decades. To do that, to truly be end-to-end and have an AI stack, you need to generate proprietary data that's clean, that's reproducible, that can actually be leveraged to develop the algorithms that drive the insights. Very few companies can do that because in order to do it, you need to have an integrated wet, dry, iterative loop system, which Recursion has. Over 60 petabytes of high quality data, multi-omic, genetic, proteomic, transcriptomic, patient data that's leveraged to do that. And what that has all come together is to create a pipeline that is pretty broad and deep. Over 30 programs across discovery and development, 10 in the clinical stage, 10 in discovery, and 10 with top 4 pharma partners. And it's not just in one, which is, I think, quite unique. It's not in one therapeutic area, one disease area. It cuts across oncology, immunology, neuroscience, and rare diseases. So the impact of what you can do at Recursion, it's very rare to have a company have such breadth and depth. And it's really that end-to-end, we call it the Recursion OS platform, leveraging AI, proprietary data, and compute that helps you drive an engine to really have that breadth and depth.
That's incredible. And what strikes me is, the size of the overall pipeline you're describing, 30 programs across 4 or 5 therapeutic areas, marquee partnerships, and I want to come back to that. I mean, Recursion is a pharma company now. It is legitimately a drug company. But I've been doing this long enough. I remember when it was much more like the two guys in a garage startup story that you hear from, say, the technology side of things. And it's only been, 10 or 12 years since the founding to grow into a full-fledged drug company. I know you've joined more recently. You joined last year, if I'm not mistaken, summer of 2024.
Yeah.
What is your mandate and how do you see your role for this sort of evolution from legitimately a technology company to now a drug company?
Well, I think you just said it. My background for those listening is my background is in organic chemistry, computer science, and business. So I was a partner at the Boston Consulting Group. I was at J&J for 7 years, heading up their AI organization from the ground up. And I also managed the R&D portfolio for the pharma side. So my world has always been a dance between the science, computer science, and then leveraging the right business acumen to drive value from these disciplines coming together. And I'm really excited to be doing just that at Recursion. So, as you mentioned, yes, most companies in the tech bio space start with an interesting assay, interesting algorithm, right? Because you have to have something that's the seed. And for Recursion, that was decoding biology using phenomics. But the company has come so far in the last decade or so. And for me, even the last 7 months that I've been here, step one, the focus was how do we take that secret sauce in terms of better understanding biology and the targets and pathway that are driving the disease through these digital maps of biology, and we can come more into that. How do you turn those insights into assets? And that's where Exscientia and the merger with Exscientia was extremely important. The use of AI and really smart med chem. You always got to have both to make these compounds rapidly. I mean, we are synthesizing about 200 compounds to get to the lead one that goes into the clinic. Industry does 2,500, 3,000, 4,000, orders of magnitude different. Timelines, some of our timelines are 18 months, maybe under 24 from an idea to getting into the clinic. Usually that takes over 4 to 5 years in pharma. So you're starting to see, as I would say, green shoots of that evolution. So my remit is really to ensure that we leverage the best of our platform, make it end to end. So biology, chemistry, clinical development, and actually have some transformational medicines for patients. And I love that because it brings all elements of biology, chemistry, clinical development, and AI together. And sometimes people tell me, Najat, like, isn't that what other companies do? It's different though, because Recursion started from the ground up native to them is to the company is the leverage of AI and so forth in order to develop better medicines. That's quite unique. And not just as an idea, but actually making products that are starting to show some interesting results and we can go to that more in a little bit.
No, that's wonderful. But one thing that strikes me about Recursion, you're absolutely right. It is technology native, right? That was the founding sort of principle, and secret sauce was all about, applying AI to high throughput phenomics imaging. But it seems the company doesn't suffer from a not built here attitude. In other words, you seem to be very happy to do big partnerships and make big acquisitions to bring in technology and expertise from the ecosystem. Perhaps you could highlight a few of those, either ones you've been involved in or even ones that predate your joining that have been, turning points for moving forward. You mentioned Exscientia, which was a big merger that was just finalized, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, I think companies that are smart focus on where do we have the right to win, not just doing interesting projects, but where can I singularly win? And then the question is, how do you win? And you have to have a mindset of let's be agnostic of where a smart idea, technology, biology, chemistry, fill in the blank comes from. And I think that's what we do at Recursion. And that's definitely something I've always done before and doubled down on. So, as an example, the Cyclica and Valence acquisitions that happened about a little over a year ago, really important to bring some of the best machine learning talent into Recursion, focusing in the chemistry and design space. So again, it started in the biology, the chemistry and design space. Doubling down on that now with Exscientia, with the applied AI focus, as well as MedChem focus and their automated chemistry platform, is a perfect complementary combination. The other aspect of it is let's talk about clinical development. We also just partnered with Faro Health in terms of simulating and just being much smarter in terms of trial design. I mean, I'm sure you've heard of this, but it's great to have a good molecule and you do in vivo work, but the real test is in the clinic. My design is smart. I would love to simulate the entire trial before I press the green button, though. And it's not fully there yet, but that's why we're also doing partnerships on the development side across the ecosystem. Another partnership is Tempus and Helix. This has given us the opportunity to take the best of our proprietary data, multi-omic data, combining that with the best that we can see outside to do a couple of things. One, in discovery to find new targets. Great. Second, and we're leveraging causal AI to actually start to stratify patients, predict who's going to respond versus not. What is that exact signature that we're looking for? That's incredibly important to improve your probability of success in the clinic. So those are just like two, three different examples. Of course, the partnership I always get asked about with NVIDIA, you know, all of that data, 60 petabytes of data and the amount that we're generating every day, every week, 2.2 million experiments a week. You need to be able to sift through that well. And for that, you need compute. We have the fastest supercomputer in the life science space and one of, top 30, 40 in the industry. So it's not just partnering with one or two, it's being very selective in the ecosystem to bring that together. Because listen, this is hard. Like I'm flying a plane that hasn't been built.
Right.
So I want help from the best and the smartest people inside and outside. And yeah, so that's a little bit of how we think.
Having worked on both sides of the ledger, you've worked for big pharma, traditional pharma, and you're now at sort of, I don't know what we want to call it, a high-flying biotech or the new generation of tech bio. What do you think are some of the shared challenges? You still have to get medicines to patients, right? So, but what are some of the similarities in terms of the challenges and approaches? And then what are some maybe cultural differences in the new version that you think give an advantage?
Well, I'll always say everything is a work in progress, right? Maybe I'll start with the cultural one. I think at a lot of the tech bio companies, given that they're native to AI, like starting with that in mind, there's a lot more openness and innovation and adopting different ways. I do think that's what's really important, which I've tried to double down on in Recursion as well, is having folks that are truly bilingual. Like your experience and expertise might be in chemistry, but I want you to be able to appreciate what it means to use generative AI. Or your foundation, a person's foundation might be in comp bio, but I want you to really appreciate how do you actually incorporate that signature in a way that you can test the genetic test or whatever in the clinic. I want you to understand clinical development, regulatory. I think that kind of bilingual talent is incredibly important to fuse these two different disciplines coming together. And then the third angle that's very important for me is making sure every single scientist or data scientist or clinical developer is also thinking with a third angle in mind, which is the business acumen. That is not something like, let's be super practical where we can win. I keep harping, why are we going to win? Why are we different? What are we doing that's different? Are we being data driven? Are we being objective and not emotional in terms of decision making? I think that openness is much more there in a Recursion or companies like that. Look, from a cultural perspective in large pharma, I get it, right? These companies have been super, super, super successful at doing things a certain way. If I'm that good, what do I need to change? So there is that resistance. Resistance usually comes from either feeling threatened or a lack of understanding of actually what AI can do versus not. And when you start to see people appreciating that, I mean, I built a team out at JJ and you really got great bilingual talent. But it's going to be a little bit of the tale of the two cities, right? Who can adopt it faster in a smarter way is, I think, going to be the winner. So that was the question in terms of the cultural piece. And a short way to say it, from a business perspective, in tech bio companies, AI isn't a nice to have. And in other companies that are more incumbents, it's a nice to have. I started a council called Disrupt, which brought the 13 top AI leaders from across pharma. And we did a benchmarking exercise. It was published. It's called Disrupt. It was published in Nature. And what you find is everyone's trying, but it's a land of pilots or a sea of pilots. And that happens when it's a nice to have. It's in the periphery, right? Versus the core center heartbeat of what one does. That's another difference. Similarities, I would say, is look, the challenges of making a medicine, and I think this is something that tech bio companies are learning. It's not as easy to develop an algorithm. It's hard. I'm humbled. In the time I was at my former employer, we had 40 approvals, which is fantastic. But I saw many, many, many failures. And it's truly humbling. You can try to control for everything and things don't work. Right? Biology is hard. I mean, at best, we understand 10 to 15% of biology, even with all of this multimodal data, proprietary data, not just in Recursions, but over the world. We still know a fraction. So there are gonna be things we don't know. So it's not a rinse and repeat. It is so much harder, but so much more rewarding. But it's super humbling. And I think that's a commonality. The other thing, as companies get bigger, silos start to happen even when you're smaller. And so it is a concerted effort to keep teams integrated. So I just finished the 2-hour meeting I was telling you before. It's our PRC, Program Review Committee. So we have teams come and present programs. And the team has ensured that the representation is not just chemistry, biology, clinical, but also the AI scientists and tech. So it's always this intentional pull and push, because if you don't, it's easy to go back into your own sort of comfort zones. So I think those are similar, but with the right leadership and the mindset, you can try to keep the right balance.
Hey there. I hope you're enjoying this episode of Talking Precision Medicine, powered by Genialis. We'll be back soon with more of my conversation with Najat Khan of Recursion Pharmaceuticals. Recursion's journey is unique in its evolution from the early tech platform days to a full-fledged clinical stage drug company. Along the way, Recursion's AI technology stack has also expanded and matured, with a major focus now on supporting clinical development. This is also where Genialis focuses most, building tools to help ensure the most promising molecules become life-saving medicines. To discuss our AI-driven solutions for translational and clinical intelligence, please contact us or meet us at an upcoming conference. We'll be at the AACR annual meeting in Chicago from April 25 to 30th, presenting 2 abstracts on how AI and multimodal data are helping to refine biomarker discovery and patient selection. If you're attending, visit genialis.com to schedule a meeting. Thanks, and now back to the conversation. You touched on so many points that I'd like to follow up on. I'll dig in a little bit about the silos. So again, Recursion has grown recently through the acquisitions of Cyclica and Valence. You mentioned last year; those were both Canadian sort of deep tech chemistry companies. Exscientia, which was a full-fledged tech biopharma type company in the UK, and I think you're based in New York. What does the overall org chart look like of a technology map? How do you think about organizing these teams to maximize productivity, but also make sure that you're not creating silos or little fiefdoms or territories?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great point. The company is becoming more global, right? So we have our headquarters in Salt Lake City, New York, like as you mentioned, Toronto, Montreal, and of course, London/Oxford. On paper, it might feel disjointed. And listen, time zones doesn't help. We have something called a golden hour, which I think is between like 10 to 12 EST, where, everyone's kind of online. You have to be more intentional in terms of how you work together. But I think there's one thing that I give kudos to the executive leadership team and the board, et cetera, that we did. When we announced the deal in like September or so, between September to November 20th when we closed, which again, very quick, September, August, every week we had very intentional deep dive meetings on programs, on platforms, on, all their aspects. And you had members from both Recursion and Exscientia coming together. So, it's nothing like getting people in a room and having to solve a problem together that gets them really unified. First you have the storming, forming, norming, but by the time you actually close the deal, you're more in the norming phase, which is kind of nice. We also had something called the 90-day goals. Like within 90 days, what are some really lighthouse projects where the teams work together that we couldn't have done ourselves separately? And I think that's helped a lot in terms of getting the teams truly integrated. So that's one. The second thing from a design element in the org chart, what we did is ensure that the representation from the best of the best talent in legacy Recursion and legacy Exscientia as a proportion stayed the same, even post synergies. That's really important. So it doesn't feel like one company subsumes the other one or vice versa. Respect is very important. And then the third thing we also did is, look, we have a research hub both in Salt Lake City and the UK. We have development hubs more on the East Coast, and we have AI machine learning hubs in Canada, Salt Lake City, and the UK. So it's not that there's one region with all of the talents. I think it's smart. Yes, it means people have to kind of figure out the hours, but you also tap into these amazing talent pools that are complementary. So you have to be very, very, very intentional and detailed in some of the org design, but also the org rollout. Not to say everything's perfect, still more work to be done. The way we use phrases versus Exscientia is different. So it's a common bridging, but we're at a really, really good place. I'm very, very pleased with how the integration is going.
That's really excellent. With, all of these new capabilities, where do you still see maybe the most room for progress in terms of Recursion's, I don't know, tech stack, or even maybe it's just a sort of more classical drug development, acumen? Where do you see room for growth?
On the biology front, Recursion really pioneered the phenomics and now transcriptomic. The next place would be proteomics, right? Also partnering and getting access to more clinical and patient data. It's a really good multimodal tech stack, but that has to continue building because the more you have connectivity between those layers, the better you can understand the disease pathology, or at least the pathophysiology that's driving the disease, the biology that's driving the disease, that's not just a singular target focused. Because most diseases are not one target focused, right? You need to understand the roadmap, the pathways, and that's what we can do with our maps of biology. So I think there's more work to do there, and also disease relevant cells and so forth. So that's one. I think other look, chemistry, there's a lot of work that's going on. I'm very, very excited about it. Translation. Look at the entire industry, no matter where you sit. Translation is one of the hardest things to do. To go like, mouse models and dog models, how predictive are they? Are they not? Can you use organoids? Has anybody figured it out? If they do, please do let me know. But
Sure.
I don't think anybody has figured it out. So what we are doing is very intentional, targeted partnership with certain companies in the ecosystem to progress it, not theoretically, but actually something we would use in a program in the clinic or preclinical. But I would love to see more development in that space across the industry. No one's figured it out, but it's good to be in that space. And then the third thing I would say, now going to development. So we talked a little bit more about the biology stack, multimodal stack, translation. If I go into clinical development, I still think patient stratification and patient selection. Phase one, phase two-ish is more exploration. What's the right dose? What's the right patient? And then we go to confirmatory. I'd love to pull that back. I'd love to be more confirmatory earlier. But for that, we need to stratify our patients better, understand better biomarkers that are not simply like one genetic mutation. Has anybody figured that out? People tell me no, because I always ask people, what can others do that I can't do? We are working on that and doubling down in that space, but I think there's more work to be done.
Well, shamelessly, I'll say you should take a look at Genialis's foundation model for patient classifiers, but we can talk about that later.
Absolutely. I'm all ears.
I'm not saying we've solved it, but we do a pretty good job in oncology anyway of figuring out who's going to respond and not.
Do I get to ask you questions now?
Yeah,
Like,
sure.
what mutation? Which? No, 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 no. Just
Anywhere in cancer and for every single target in the transcriptome. So
yeah.
yeah, it's working well. I wanted to circle back to something that we just kind of started talking about, which is your role. And you have these dual roles of head of R&D and commercial. And I'm getting a sense that you really do think of these in kind of a unified way because you're interested in winning on the market and taking that all the way back to like what diseases and targets to pursue. But how does that play out? How do you actually wear those two hats? You're taking one off, putting on the other, or do they both fit at the same time?
Oh, they definitely fit at the same time. Look, I think I have a history of always doing roles that are like an and. Even at J&J, I was heading up this. I was the global head of R&D strategy and portfolio, and the chief data science officer. And often asks me the same question, like why the both and how do the hats fit? I said, look, if you're trying to use AI in a very directed fashion and impactful fashion, you need to understand the core business and what's going wrong. Like having portfolio insight means you know what are the challenges and you apply AI in a targeted way. And honestly, you can make better portfolio decisions if you understand AI better because it's more objective. So that was my thesis then. What is my thesis now? When I look across the industry, there's always this tension between R&D and commercial, which is like R&D wants to create really interesting molecules. Commercial will say we can't commercialize it. Well, that doesn't make any sense. Like at the end of the day, like you said, you got to win. So you want to win with the end in mind and go backwards, right? And then project what is good enough, because by the time you get to the market, there are others in the game too. So the way and again, perfect example today is where that hat is every single program that we are either putting into the pipeline or progressing. I ask three questions. Number one, what is the platform AI insight that we have that's different from anybody else? Number two, tell me why, the R&D, like whether it's preclinical, clinical data is unique. And number three, what is the commercial model and how are we different from competitors? I can't imagine thinking one or the other without. So that's one piece. The second piece is, look, Recursion also has an opportunity, and I think it's very interesting. Like from a commercial perspective, you have the asset commercial work stream, which is like the very traditional, like license an asset with a pharma company. And either you do co or you out license. So that's one stream. The other is you take a molecule all the way and you actually commercialize it. And I think there you're already starting to see a lot of innovation in those commercial business models. That is not lost on us. Let's just put it that way as we get close to late stage programs. And number three is also we have data, models, algorithm, end-to-end AI tech stack, more of that software that's quite unique. So for instance, Low, which is this large language orchestrated workflows, where all of the different AI modules that I just mentioned from biology, chemistry, etc., come together in a way where you can just put in a prompt as a scientist who doesn't understand AI, and you can sit through all of the different modules as appropriate to find the right target, to generate molecules, to start ordering the chemical building blocks, and so forth. And Bayer, which is one of our partners, is the first user of that solution. So look, there are also these other aspects there, and we are of course thinking and about how we want to, if we want to monetize it. So what I love about the commercial hat is not just the feasibility for the assets or feasibility of how do we bring revenues in by working with partners and so forth, but also the data, AI model, etc. angle as well. It's fun.
But what I love about that, and again, because I think I appreciate something about how the target discovery engine, the phenomics works, is that you're not constrained to just chasing me too targets with maybe a slightly better molecule.
Yeah.
You can actually let the biology tell you where there's a therapeutic opportunity that could be really unique, which I think is incredibly important. There aren't enough drugs out there going after new things, in my opinion.
You're spot on. I mean, that's something, again, putting my commercial hat on or putting it in the front a little bit, I guess. When I when I look at what's happening, I mean, there's always been competition, right? But now with the Me Too competition from China, it's fierce. So having novel IP, having novel targets, pathway understanding becomes even more important to be able to win. So Recursion's thesis to start in biology was the right one.
Um, I want to ask one more question about recursion, then take a detour to the industry in general. What are the sort of most advanced programs that we should be looking out for readouts on, and what should the market take from this?
Yeah, I mean, great question. Here's what I would say, when you look at the late stage pipeline, it's primarily bucketed into oncology and rare diseases of high unmet need. So in oncology, for instance, RBM39, this is a program that's in solid tumors and lymphoma. We just started recruiting. The target came from the Phenomic platform. The molecule was also designed using our platform, 18 months versus 42 months or so, which is the industry standard. It's in the clinic. It's biomarker enriched, so this whole piece around patient stratification. We haven't shared the exact biomarker for competitive purposes. I think that's an important program. It's a tough target, but to your point again about novel targets and really, it's important for splicing fidelity and hopefully we think important for DDR modulation. So that's one. The other piece I would say is also CDK7, which we just shared some data at the special AACR in December. That's more of a potential best in class, could be first in class approach where biology is known, but it's really hard to make a molecule that has the right therapeutic index. There are other competitors, but due to permeability and other challenges, they have not been able to dose up to really maximize target engagement and get to the therapeutic index that you want to. So this one, leveraging generative AI and active learning would really optimize the molecule. It's in monotherapy dose escalation. We just shared some data. We did not expect any activity, but we see some in patients. We also see the right PK profile about an order of magnitude higher. So you're getting that exposure, check. 80 to 90% targeting given, that's good. It's still in monotherapy dose escalation, and we're going to start combos mid of this year. So maybe some more monotherapy data to see. Those are a couple ones. I would say on the rare disease, we just shared our CCM data last week. That came from the earliest iteration of the Recursion platform. I call it the baby platform, like way back in 2015 or so. Huge unmet need. Surgery is the only option, and there's no drugs there. We have ODD in both US and EU. For that, what you do see is a reduction in the lesion volume, which is the lesions are the hallmark of this disease.
This is craniofacial cavernous malformation. Is that right? CCM? Did I get the acronym right?
No, it's in the brain,
A
cerebral
cerebral.
cavernous malformation.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and it is challenging, right? Like, patients tend to have neurological focal deficits, dizziness, hemorrhage. And there are papers that showcase basically the top three predictors of having another V-bleed is your lesion size and volume, is have you had a prior bleed before? And then third is, do you have a lesion in the brainstem? Brainstem is incredibly challenging. And 1 out of 4 patients that are symptomatic have a brainstem lesion. Anyways, putting that together, we see some trends. I mean, the study wasn't powered. It was a signal seeking, first in disease. No one's ever studied an acid in this. We do see a reduction in the lesion volume. We also see some shift in the MRS Rankin score, which is important. It's basically a general measure of a disability that is measured by clinicians. So that's exciting, but more work to be done. We want to look at long-term extension study that is ongoing right now. And we also want to, engage with the FDA. There's no precedence from a regulatory perspective here. So it's going to be that hard work when you're the first, but it's also pretty rewarding when you're the first. And then another rare disease one, just putting it on your radar, is ENPP1. This is for hypophosphatasia. It's basically, a genetic mutation. You don't have a certain enzyme. As a result, some of these biochemical levels are low and you end up having bone mineralization challenges. Strensiq in the market is an enzyme replacement therapy that's on the market for patients. Only 20% of the patients or so that needed get access because of the high cost, 3 to 6 injections a week. It's tough, right? So now this is an oral ENPP1 that we're developing in collaboration with Bradley Bio, and we're excited by it. An oral option would mean a lot for patients, and more to come there. So I guess what I'm trying to give you is a flavor of, in oncology, novel target or best in class, because it's a hard target to drugs. The 2 examples there. There's other examples in between. And then also in rare diseases, first of everything, CCM. And then PP1 and HPP is, there's something on the market, but we need something better for patients. So those are some of the ones, more data to come. We have about 10 milestones in the next 18 months, program starts, readouts, and so on.
Well, that's fantastic. In the interest of time, because I know you've got a busy schedule, I'm going to smash together a handful of questions I'd say for the end. And so I want to get your take, because you've really been on the ground floor of kind of the implementation, the advent of AI in pharma. Would you say 7 years ago at J&J-ish? This was before even we stood up the Alliance for AI in Healthcare, which you and I have done a little bit of work on
Yeah.
concurrently. That was 6 years ago. So, and companies like Recursion, again, are about 10, 12 years old. The oldest of the current tech bio waves, so Recursion, Benevolent, and Silico, et cetera, these are all like 2013-ish foundings, right? So this is new still. These companies are still babies as companies, but the technology is coming incredibly a long way. And now the medicines are coming a long way. And now the traditional pharma are coming and saying, hey, we've got to have this AI too. Where do you see the state of the technology? I mean, did you even envision this 7 years ago? Maybe you could just kind of talk a little bit about how AI itself has grown up, how the industry's perception of it has changed, and what you think that means going forward.
It's a great question. Like 6, 7 years ago, I think there were very few leaders in the pharma space, like senior leaders, that were even thinking of AI and incorporating that, like in a meaningful way, not like a headline. Matai Mammon was one of those at J&J. I mean, he was the head of R&D at J&J, built an amazing pipeline that we see today, which is great for patients. He was like, look, in the next 5 years, this is going to look very different. We need to start applying AI to all aspects of the important problems which lead to the 10% failure rate. Is one of the OG/pioneers. So I give him credit for that. Here's what's happened. Even 5 years ago, people are like, okay, we should do one partnership so we can check the box that we've done AI. That means, right? And then you have some companies, whether it's Roche, with the acquisition of Flatiron and Foundation, or J&J building out. So the team I built out, 5 to 250 in 3 years. Like, it's a meaningful scaled across our entire discovery and development portfolio. So efforts are happening there. I think there was a pivotal shift with AlphaFold, where a lot of the people that were naysayers saw a problem that was technically super hard, that AI was starting to make a difference. But then it was like, hey, it's good in abstract, but not really applied. And I think those companies that have made the investment, whether it's the Recursions and others of the world, or in pharma, some select companies that have really tried to integrate it, you start to see examples such as molecules that are designed using AI faster, less cycles. Or you start to recruit patients much faster because, hey, you're not going and phoning a friend to say, do you have 5 patients at the site? But you're using real world data and machine learning to create hotspots of where the eligible patient population is. Much smarter way of recruiting, right? So you're starting to see that evolution starting to happen. And I think I would not, if you had asked me 6 years ago, I would have not expected to see the progress on the chemistry side as quickly. And when I say chemistry, I also mean biologics, small molecule and biologics, as quickly as it's happened. The other shift was ChatGPT. I still remember there was a very senior executive, I won't mention his name, at J&J, who said to me, because we're talking about ChatGPT, he's like, Najat, there is no I in AI. And so why do you say that? It just isn't. And I'm like, well, have you tried ChatGPT? He's like, oh, it's always wrong. I said, just try it. Just give it a go. You can teach it. It will learn from you. It's like a first year analyst. It needs a good mentor. So he did for 2 weeks. And then I met him. He's like, you know what? It's getting better. I said, yeah, see, it's good not to have blind spots. So I think there is just a resistance, and it still exists because until we'll have one or two clinical stage programs that unequivocally have better data because they were developed using AI in some way, a lot of people are watching from the sidelines and not, as I say, getting into the arena. And then there's going to be a huge herd mentality when that happens. And the minute that there's a failure, I think it will be nice for some people to say, see, I told you so, it doesn't work. But generally, you have some up and down, but the progression is going up. It's just bumpy, but you want to be part of it. So I think there's definitely an acknowledgement. If I can just say the challenge is ideas are great. Millions of ideas exist. But like what you were saying, being on the ground floor and actually being able to pick the right idea and to integrate it within the teams and to deliver outcome, very few people are able to do that. And that's where I think whether it's incumbent pharma or tech bio, biotech, I call it the tale of two cities. Either can win, right? Because pharma, you have resources, you have everything that's needed for clinical discovery development except AI. And for tech bio, you're building out all of that as you go. But it's going to be who can deploy it the best and in the smart way that's going to win. So it's going to be fun to figure out. I am, of course, biased.
Of course. Parting thoughts, 5, 10 years from now, Wall Street, don't listen to this as a forward-looking statement. What if Recursion does its job right? Where is Recursion in the pantheon of pharma companies and technology companies?
Knock on wood. I think if we do things right, Recursion can be one of the companies that has, you said it's an iconic company. It's a company that started early. But we'll talk about Recursion as being the company that has categorically showed examples of medicines that others could not have made. Better, faster. I would say people say faster, cheaper is nice to have. I want to hear that is better. And, having the rise of those examples where you're bending that success rate, which is 10%. I think that's where I would like Recursion to be. And honestly, like I would love to see us deliver those medicines, not just create them and have a nice publication, but deliver it to patients that need. The commercial model is so old and needs to be disrupted. So I'd love to be able, or Recursion to be able to do that. Reach patients, not just have nice ideas.
Well, I can't wait to see it. Najat Khan, thank you so much for chatting with me today.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
This has been another episode of the Talking Precision Medicine podcast, brought to you by Genialis. Hopefully by now you've subscribed to the show, but if not, go ahead and click that subscribe button and leave us a review. And please do pay us a visit at www.genialis.com. That's www.genialis.com to learn more about how AI is transforming precision medicine. Thanks for listening, and see you next time.